oral argument was concluded today. Commissioners, allow me to confirm that each of you have reviewed the record and read the transcripts for any meeting that you may have missed, and that you are prepared to deliberate on the subject docket. After I call your name, please signify whether you are prepared to deliberate on this matter. Commissioner Chalk?
Yes.
Commissioner Contreras?
Yes.
Commissioner Makua?
Aye.
Commissioner Judge?
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald?
Yes.
Commissioner Heller?
Yes.
Commissioner Tevis?
Yes.
Commissioner Matsumura?
Yes.
I'm also prepared to deliberate on this matter. The Commission will render a decision by way of motion on whether to grant, in whole or in part, to deny petitioner's request to reclassify the subject petition area. If a decision is rendered, staff, with the Commission's guidance, will be directed to draft appropriate findings of fact, conclusions of law, and decision in order reflecting the Commission's decision. That in mind, Commissioners, what is your pleasure in this matter?
Sure, I'd like to move to go into executive session to consult with our attorney. Second.
There's a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Folks, you can stay put. We will.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Tevis?
before proceeding further, I would first like to acknowledge the petitioner, the City and State Office of Planning's intervener, Senator Clayton He, Dr. Dudley, and the Sierra Club, all of whom provided more than sufficient detailed information to allow this commission an opportunity to make a complete and fair decision. I would also like to thank the many public witnesses who testified at these hearings. Your input is always appreciated. With this now said, regarding Land Use Commission docket number A06-771, in the matter of the petition of D.R. Harton, Sheila Homes, LLC, to amend the agricultural land use district boundaries into the urban land use district for approximately 1,553.844 acres in Eva District, Island of Oahu. I would like to make a motion to approve this petition. I'm also open to accept any friendly amendments from my fellow commissioners.
Commissioner Heller?
Yes, I will second the motion, and I have some comments and some proposed amendments in terms of conditions. First, I want to join in thanking all of the parties and their respective representatives, all the public witnesses, for all the work that's been done to present information to us. A lot of information has been presented, and I appreciate all the effort that it took. I think at this point we have the information we need to make a decision. That does not mean that it's an easy decision. There are strong arguments on both sides, and this is not a matter where the right answer is clear and easy to determine. I want to stress that my personal vote on this matter is not based on what I like or don't like. The question here is not how I feel about the project. There are specific statutory provisions that govern the decision that we're supposed to make here. And my job is to apply those statutory criteria to the evidence. My personal gut level reaction is not one of the criteria. Now, there are a lot of different issues and sub-issues that we need to look at in this case. I'm not going to try to discuss all of them, but there are several points that I think are important. First, with respect to the constitutional argument, I do not believe that Article 11, Section 3 bars this commission from reclassifying land from agricultural to urban. Article 11, Section 3 says that the state shall protect agricultural land, but it doesn't spell out in the Constitution how that is to be done. In fact, it basically says that the legislature shall spell out the details. If the intent had been to simply say that no agricultural land may be reclassified to urban, it would have been a lot easier to just say that. But that's not what Article 11, Section 3 says. The rule says that if land is identified as important agricultural land, then it cannot be reclassified without, number one, meeting the standards and criteria established by the legislature, and number two, being approved by a 2/3 vote of the body responsible for making the decision. In this case, even if the latter provision applied, that wouldn't make any difference, because under our rules, it takes 6 affirmative votes to approve a petition anyway. Since we are a 9-member commission, by definition, if we approve, we're doing it by a 2/3 majority. So in terms of the constitutional provision, the question comes down to whether the land is identified by the state as important agricultural land, and if so, whether reclassification to urban meets the standards and criteria established by the legislature. Now, it has been suggested that the land in question here could be, and perhaps should be, officially designated as important agricultural land pursuant to HRS Section 205-47. However, as we sit here today, that has not been done. I think we have to base our decision on the facts that actually exist right now, and not on things that the city and county could potentially choose to do. I also note that the city and county is not asking us to deny the petition or to delay any action while the city completes its process with respect to designating important agricultural land. Other parties have suggested that we should wait, but this is a city and county process, and the city and county itself has not requested that we wait. Now, with respect to the statutory criteria, obviously preserving agricultural land is a key goal that we are required to consider. In fact, preserving agricultural land is probably the primary element of our overall mission. However, under HRS Section 205-17, we are also required to consider employment opportunities and economic development and the availability of housing to all income groups. In terms of conformity to the state plan, there are multiple goals and objectives that we need to consider. The state plan recognizes a number of different policies and priorities, including economic growth and the creation of jobs, as well as the protection of agriculture. In the real world, every proposed project has some advantages and some disadvantages, and we have to consider the balance. Determining whether or not a project is consistent with the state plan is not a mechanical process. It's a process that requires the exercise of judgment, weighing of the pluses and minuses. While I recognize that there are arguments both ways, considering the overall balance of all the factors, I think the proposed project is consistent with the state plan. Of course, we also have to look at the city and county general plan and the EVA development plan. Those factors may actually be a little easier to consider. First, I think it's clear that the proposed development is consistent with the city and county general plan and with the EVA development plan as those plans exist today. Now, the opponents of this project are basically arguing that the city and county should update and revise the EVA development plan. Personally, I'm inclined to agree that the city ought to take another look at the EVA development plan, but I think we have to base our decision on the actual EVA development plan that exists today and not on some hypothetical revised version that could potentially come out of an updating process. It's not our job to rewrite the city and county's plan. It's certainly not appropriate for me to decide this case based on my own view of what the city and county's plan ought to say rather than what it does say. Now, that doesn't mean we should disregard the agricultural use or agricultural potential of this land. That's clearly the toughest factor in this decision, is the loss of agricultural land. In looking at that, we should be aware of the potential impact of this decision on other landowners and other land. In terms of promoting and protecting agriculture, I think we want to encourage landowners to make their land available for farming. In this case, the land is being used for agriculture right now because the landowner agreed to lease that land to farmers. If we say that the existence of the current farming activity is a reason to deny the petition, we could be sending a message to other landowners. That message would say, basically, if you have any hope of ever developing your land, you better not lease it to a farmer because the existence of a farming lease will be held against you. There could be unintended consequences, potentially serious negative consequences for agriculture if we say that allowing farming on your land will prevent you from being able to get that land reclassified. I also want to note that the Department of Agriculture basically said it does not oppose the petition, given the petitioner's plans for an agricultural component within the development. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should just blindly agree with whatever the Department of Agriculture says, but I do think we should take note of and give some weight to the position of the primary state agency responsible for agriculture. Finally, on the subject of agriculture, the proposed development does have a significant agricultural component. The community farms, the steward farms. I have some doubts about how those programs are actually going to work in reality. But regardless of those doubts, I think the agricultural component of this proposal is the type of innovation that we probably ought to be encouraging. Going back to the state plan, development that includes an agricultural component achieves more of the goals of that plan. Also, I note that the Department of Agriculture seems to believe that the agricultural component of the project is a significant positive factor. One of my other concerns is traffic and transportation issues. I have very serious doubts about the adequacy of the traffic studies that have been completed and the sufficiency of the mitigation measures that are being proposed. In particular, the proposed project will clearly affect traffic on the H1 freeway, and the concept of fixing that by repainting the lane lines raises a lot of questions. I'm not a traffic engineer, and I don't claim to be an expert on traffic mitigation, but it seems to me that having more cars on the same physical pavement has to result in more traffic problems, regardless of whether or how you repaint the stripes. Now, since I'm not a traffic engineer, I don't want to try to micromanage the traffic solutions, but I do want to make sure those issues are adequately addressed. Therefore, one of the conditions that I would like to suggest as an amendment is the specific requirement of a new TIAR based on reasonably current data, addressing the proposed phasing of the development and proposing mitigation measures that are acceptable to the State Department of Transportation and the City Department of Transportation Services. With respect to the specific terms of that condition, I think the petitioner's proposed condition number 10, as amended by the stipulations between the petitioner and the city and between the petitioner and the Office of Planning, is basically acceptable. But I would like to see a specific statement added that the new TIAR and any and all updates to the new TIAR will set forth whatever assumptions are being made about the construction schedule for the Honolulu Rail Transit project, and will address the question of what happens if there are significant changes to that schedule. I'm not saying what the specific answer has to be in terms of mitigation. I'm just saying that the question of what happens if the rail plan changes should be specifically addressed. Finally, I want to raise the issue of drainage and stormwater runoff. At this point, that's partially an unresolved question. As I understand it, the Navy will not allow any solution that increases the runoff onto Navy lands. The petitioner has a plan that involves drainage from the West Loch Basin going across Navy land. Thus, they may need to implement an alternative plan if they cannot get the Navy's consent. I think we need to modify proposed condition 11 to have a specific requirement that the petitioner submit a drainage plan either attaching a written consent from the Navy or explaining why the Navy's consent is not required, to be submitted to the city prior to final subdivision approval, or if subdivision approval is in phases, prior to subdivision approval for any phase that includes the West Loch Basin drainage area. Therefore, to wrap all this up, I'm proposing two amendments to the motion. The two conditions would be that proposed condition number 10 include a specific requirement in the TIAR, as I described, regarding what happens if the schedule for the rail changes, and proposed condition number 11 would have a specific modification dealing with stormwater runoff, as I just described. Thank you.
Commissioner Tedis, do you accept the amendments
Yes.
as proposed?
Yes, I do.
There's a pending motion. Discussion? Commissioner Mr. Makua?
Aloha. I would like to also echo my mahalo to all the parties here for your time and effort, for everyone that came out to give testimony. I know the sacrifice it took for you to be here, and some of you we saw here at each meeting all these months, and I hear all of you, and I'm very grateful for the time you spent here. I'm also grateful that we have these laws that govern our decisions, and for me, when I read HAR 15-15-77, that requires that agriculture lands in production 2 years prior to the filing of a petition shall not be reclassified unless the development is needed for urban growth or if reclassification will not impair agricultural production in the state. For me, my decision is based on what will be impacted greater. Will the production of agriculture be impacted greater than the fulfillment of those homes for urban growth? And for me, with that land representing 32% of the land in production of all of Hawaii, that is a greater impact. I would also like to trust in the state agencies to make those decisions, but I was not convinced by the testimony of Russell Kokobun and those details that he didn't know about. Can we grow duplicate crops in those other lands? What is the cost of infrastructure? And we've also heard debates on, is this land the most productive in the state? And for me, for the people subleasing the land at double price, says that the land is worth preserving. The traffic is also a concern of mine. Alvin Takeshita said that D service level is considered acceptable. And right now there are many areas that are already F. I just heard on the radio the other day that Honolulu was just rated the worst city in the nation as far as traffic. He also said that quality of life is considered when making these decisions to support a petition, but it was also confirmed that they never surveyed there was no survey done of the residents in the area. When asked by Commissioner Heller if there was contingency plans if the railroad does not proceed, he answered that would have to be worked out later. For me, there's just a lot of pukas, for lack of a better term. And we're asked to make a leap of faith that all these things will be worked out and that, almost 12,000 homes, which have the average of 3 people, so 30,000 people won't be driving on that road, and that won't negatively impact these highways. For me, that's a huge leap of faith, and one that I'm in good conscience cannot make today.
Further discussion, commissioners? Commissioner Contreras?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also would like to thank everybody for the many, many hours that you have spent here testifying and being part of this docket. I was born here in Hawaii many, many years ago. I'm not ashamed to say I'm 62 years old. I've spent a great deal of my adult life as a volunteer, 7 years as a planning commissioner on Kauai, 8 years as a Hawaiian Homes Commissioner, and now 7 years as a land use commissioner. I've seen our state change I once went to Canada, and when I showed them my birth certificate, the Canadian official started laughing because he said, "You were born in the territory of Hawaii." And I said, "Yes, I was, and I'm proud of it." As a young boy, I grew up in a family of 10 children. The place that I lived at was owned by a family known as the Stinson family. They were a large landowner. Their father died, and the family was left with a huge tax bill. So they subdivided their land and sold it because they could not pay the taxes. The lots were 18,000 square feet. My dad bought 2 of them. They were selling for $400 a lot. Because he bought 2, they gave him a discount. He paid $750. He built a home on that, sold that home, and then built the house that I grew up in, and that is still standing today. We grew mangoes, papayas, avocados, bananas. We had a little farm because there were 10 of us. We had chickens, rabbits, ducks. We did not go to a store because we could not afford it. We ate fish. We collected limo. We did many of those things that Senator He talked about that we can no longer do today because when I was born on Kauai, there were only 19,000 people living there. There are now 70,000. The state of Hawaii had less than 500,000 people. We now have over 1 million. So things change. There is constant change. There has been constant change in my life. It is not easy to accept some of these things. The home that I grew up in, where I once raised papayas and bananas and mangoes and everything, is still there, but in back of the home, my sister lives. There is no more mango trees, there are no more papayas, because she needed a place to live. You can drive up on Kauai Hau Road where I grew up, and every family I knew. Today, every lot has at least 2 homes on it, because the families could not afford it. They had to use their land to build more homes. To say that we do not need homes anywhere is ridiculous. There is a need. There is no doubt about it. Many of the homes that have been talked about that are slated to be built probably never will be built because of the economic problems. But we do know that D.R. Horton has built many, many homes in Hawaii. And I do believe that they will build this. Now we talk about agriculture. I sat here all these months and never said a word. You have no idea how hard it was for me not to stand up and tell everybody, the best agricultural land in the state of Hawaii is not at Ho'opili. It is on my island. No 2 ways about it. It has been stated in many agricultural articles all over the world. If you go to the west side of Kauai, you can grow anything. It is so good, it is unbelievable. We had a farmer who was my personal friend, because I used to go help him, who raised many different kinds of crops there. But because he could not sell them, he lost his business, and the land is in weeds today. There is plenty of land, plenty of land. And I'm going to read something to you that we all have ignored. A letter from Alex Su, principal and general manager of a loon farm, who said, "We do not view the plans by D.R. Horton as the end of all farming in Honolulu, much less Hawaii. In fact, we at Loon Farms believe our future is bright for farming in Honolulu, especially with the strong growing interest in the public and elected officials with supporting sustainable agriculture. We believe there is more than sufficient land on Oahu to support our farming operations, and with continued support by enlightened landowners, government agencies, and elected officials, we will continue to expand our ability to provide vegetables and produce to local residents." The man that we are talking about that has been farming this land, that was his own personal statement signed by his own hand. There is much land available. I do not base my decision on the city and county of Honolulu and their plans. That's not what I base it on. I base it upon my personal belief that we are doing the correct thing. I thank Commissioner Heller because I wanted to raise some of the issues that he did, so now I don't have to say them. But there are issues, and we are all concerned. But we have the right to make this decision. I believe we are doing it for the right reasons, and I believe we're following the Constitution of the state of Hawaii. But there is one more thing that I would like to suggest. Condition number 15 on civil defense. I want to make sure that this is done. I grew up in an area next to the ocean for a long, long time. And whenever there was a warning and everything, oftentimes we did not have a siren. You watch the ocean. And my daddy used to tell me, when the ocean starts going out, you run to the highlands. There was no civil defense system at that time. That was our defense system. It says here, the petitioner shall, on a fair share basis. I want to change that to read this way. The petitioner shall pay for and construct adequate civil defense measures serving the petition area as determined by the State Hawaii Department of Defense, the State Civil Defense SCD. The civil defense measures shall be operational prior to occupancy in homes or businesses. And that is my friendly offer for an amendment.
Commissioner Tevis, do you accept the amendment?
Yes, I do.
Commissioners, further discussion? Commissioner Judge?
Thank you, Chair. I will echo the sentiments of my fellow commissioners in thanking all the parties and all of the people who have come time after time to give us testimony. I realize it's not easy because I sit here after 8 years and I'm still nervous speaking right now. Thank you to Commissioner Heller for bringing up all those excellent points. And in my 8 years, we had to make a lot of decisions, but I think this is the hardest. It's probably the largest. It is the largest, but it's also been the hardest because we've had a lot of testimony and we've had a lot of adversarial testimony. And there is nothing simple or straightforward, black or white, about this case. I would say it's a million shades of gray. And that's why it's been a very difficult discussion and decision. And there was reference before that the votes have been counted, and I think that's very unfair to this commission because I think we take this very seriously. Regarding the ag production and the food sustainability issue, I thank everybody for bringing that up because that's something that we've never had talked about in front of this commission, and it's very important. And I think it's also important to know that, and it was brought up by the petitioner, that a no vote here today doesn't mean that this land will stay in agricultural production. I mean, I think they were very clear in saying that in fact it won't. It will lead to seed corn, or it doesn't assure that this will remain in agricultural production or food production or add to the food sustainability or increase the food supply. So I think that's important. I also believe that there is a need for urban growth. I think the record shows that going forward, the population of Honolulu is going to continue to grow, and there's definitely a need for new homes and new affordable homes. And then the question becomes, where should that go? And I do believe in the planning process. I believe in the idea of having directed growth plans so that you have an idea of where that growth is going to go so you can protect your open space. And I do believe in that community plan process, and this land is slated for that growth. I am deeply, deeply troubled by the traffic issue, as I think you've heard from all of our commissioners. I'm not a resident of Oahu, but from the testimony and just from watching the television and watching the log jump, the jams, the traffic is very bad on H1. And I can say that I was very disappointed in the state DOT's testimony in really not giving us any answers or any mitigation of how they intend to solve that. I think Commissioner Heller's amendment regarding the TAR is a very good one. And I was also encouraged to hear in Mr. Kudo's opening statement a very clear list of improvements that the petitioner is going to commit to. So I would like to make a friendly amendment based on that in the traffic condition, we add a sub-letter or however category, and we list those items that Mr. Kudo listed in his opening statement as something that the commissioner shall do at a minimum, the list that Mr. Kudo stated. And again, this has been a very difficult decision. I've debated with myself for several months now on a daily basis which way to go. But I echo Commissioner Heller's statement in that this is not a personal decision. I don't get to do what Lisa Judge wants to do. This is a decision that's based upon statutory requirements. And in looking at the record, that's why I'm going to support this petition today.
Further discussion, commissioners? Commissioner Cha?
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to start by recognizing all of the parties, the public, and especially the staff who assisted us through this matter. And also to point out in specific the participation of the interveners in this process that we've had from start to finish. And would specifically like to express my appreciation to Senator He, who's been a champion of many causes. He's a Kanaka. He supports and leads with many traditional Hawaiian leadership values that I try to emulate in my life. His ike, his kia'i, and his manao have been invaluable to this process. And although we agree on some points, we disagree on others. I always respect what he brings to the table. Dr. Dudley, thank you for standing up and standing for something. You have been here from day one when you were the only voice here, and I respect and appreciate that. I remember being a student at the university in political science, reading your book, Call to Hawaiian Sovereignty, and even before the whole issue of sovereignty and Native Hawaiian rights were on anybody's radar, you were there then as you are now. And I appreciate your presence here, Sierra Club. Thank you as well for being here. There's also a fourth intervener who doesn't have a seat at the table, who I felt was very instrumental also in this process. They sat here at every hearing and conducted themselves with a lot of respect and dignity. And that's the House of Labor that has stood up and stood for jobs. And I think at the end of the day, as I listen to a lot of the arguments that are expressed on both sides of the table between the proponents of agriculture and the proponents of jobs, at the end of the day, they all want the same thing. They want to feed their family. And the question is how we go about doing that. Just taking off on some of the exhibits that were cited in this particular docket by Senator He cited a pamphlet that was authored by Governor Ariyoshi that was at times critical of the public's role in the Land Use Commission process. And just wanted to point to, since I've been on the commission, a number of petitions in which we've had interveners participate that I have felt, and I said this during my confirmation proceedings, have added to the value and the outcomes that we've reached here. And I can count as many as a dozen plus interventions going back for several years now, ranging from the petition we heard yesterday, Castle and Cook Coal Ridge, I think as many as 3 times, Forest City, Tropic Land, LLC, Waimanalo Gulch, Hawaiian Memorial Life Plan, O'oma Beachside Village, and on and on. We've had interveners as a regular part of our process, and the public's voice and role in all of our proceedings has been very well represented, and I believe we've done more than our share to accommodate the public's voice as part of these proceedings. Overall, when we look at what our mandate is as a commission, it is to look at a number of criteria, not one single criteria, but the one criteria that I think we've come under, and that has been the major source of this petition, has been the importance and protection of important ag land. And again, I'd like to point out that if you look at the total body of work in terms of the deliberations of the Land Use Commission and some of the proceedings that I personally have been involved in, with respect to important ag land petitions. We've reclassified over 90,000 acres of important ag land on all islands, not on all islands, but on all major islands: Kauai, Maui, Oahu, Hawaii Island, Alexander and Baldwin, Castle and Cook, Mahaulepu Farm, Kauai, Parker Ranch, total of over 90,000 acres of important ag land that will be dedicated not just for 5 years or for 10 years or 20 years, but in perpetuity. I've also been privileged to be part of a vote to reclassify the Ka'ivi shoreline from urban to conservation. And I've also been a part of a decision that has been not covered adequately enough with respect to the first case in which the Land Use Commission has reverted land for lack of performance by a developer for failure to meet conditions. And so when you look at the body of work and the body of criteria that is in front of us, I just want to point that out. One of the quotes that I wanted to share from Governor Ariyoshi's pamphlet comes under a section where he talks about re-examining the state of Hawaii, and I'd like to quote from it. Let's be honest. As we observe 50 years of Hawaii's statehood, the tradition I'm describing, the core belief in the power of government to address problems, has declined. The traditional leadership in not only government but also in business and labor has weakened. Key institutions have deteriorated. Our planning processes have been undercut. We are still thought of as special, but Hawaii occupies a less distinctive niche in the national and world stage than it did. We are less sure of what Hawaii has to offer. We are less in touch with what makes us different. And yesterday, I believe it was Attorney Seitz who cited breaches, and breaches to the public interest, in my opinion, has been a direct result in terms of breaches of leadership that has happened, that we have fallen victim to in our state for several decades now, where now the decision that is before us today, we're trying to hold the Land Use Commission responsible for basically a dereliction of duty that has occurred for a long time that could have positioned our state to deal with the housing shortage that we currently face, where Hawaii ranks on the bottom, I believe 49th or 50th, last in the entire state in terms of home ownership, last in terms of the highest percentage of families living under the same roof. And we've done nothing to turn the tide on that. And we've done nothing also to turn the tide in terms of food security and energy independence. But yet that's not the exclusive role and responsibility of the State Land Use Commission. To sum up where I'm coming from, Hawaii has done a really good job in exporting one crop in all the time that I've lived here, and I've lived here my entire life, and I'll never live anywhere else. And we've done a good job growing and exporting our kids. It's our #1 export crop. That's our future that we've sent away. And that's all I got to say, Chair.
Further discussion? Commissioner McDonald?
I'd like to again thank all the parties, interveners, as well as the public for their participation in these hearings. As my fellow commissioners have noted, this is never an easy decision, and we do take it very seriously. For me, it comes down to a balance of development versus preservation. And what Commissioner Heller had stated as far as meeting the statutes and our decision-making criteria, I'll leave it at that. I think he spoke clearly as far as our duties and responsibilities. For me, I believe we need to stay committed to the vision of the second city of Kapolei, in which decades of planning and collaboration was afforded by all levels of state, county, but more importantly, our communities. This vision, which includes Ho'opili, consists of the state's goals to ensure economic stability, diversity, growth for future generations, whereby directing growth to the Ever Plain. And for me, this is important. It's relieving those development pressures from the rural areas such as Waianae, the North Shore, Ko'olauloa, and Ko'olaupoko. Therefore, I will support this petition.
Commissioners, further discussion? Commissioner Matsumura?
Good afternoon. I too want to thank all of the people that participated in this group process. And I think that's wonderful that we have an organization as such that we can participate. My concern, I think, was, as I look back in history, and I'm older than Thomas, is that when I grew up, the majority of the land was owned by either state or private sector big businesses, plantations. How in the world, I always thought, that you can divide that property and have that to the majority of the people? One is through what Horton is trying to do. We talk about agriculture, and I've seen on the Big Island, we're always talking about agriculture, but I have not seen them to be successful. There's, I think, a lot of work to be done. One of the things I think that needs to be done is the subdivision of, in a realistic scale, and identify those properties as important agricultural land, that there's no speculation. They need to have ownership on the property, and that you need to have some economic value from that. If you're going to be speculation, then you're going to have a high agriculture values, then the farmers can't own the properties. So I think there's a lot of turmoil in me when I see this, the issues that we're going through. And we talk about agriculture, but I have not heard a solution on how in the world that you're going to do agriculture. And it's simplistically saying we're going to grow more things. It's not a solution. I've been in industry for many years. I was a wholesaler, I was a distributor, I was a manufacturer. So I dealt with the farmers. And I've seen a lot of my friends that are farmers go bankrupt almost. So they need to have another solution. And I think that we all have to work together, come out with some kind of a realistic solution that it can become economically successful. I don't think the answers are here yet. I have not heard that. So I think as I make my decisions today, I'm weighing the pros of what the developer is trying to do. This way, at least, the individual person will own land. How, on the other side, we talk about agriculture, how is the farmers will own land so they can become farmers. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Tevis, just a couple of housekeeping items regarding your motion. Do you accept Commissioner Judge's amendment?
Yes.
Okay. And then for clarification purposes, does your motion seek to approve the stipulated conditions between the petitioner and the county and the state?
Yes.
Okay. Before we move to the vote, the comments and discussion by the commissioners preceding me, I think, was far more eloquent and insightful than anything I could probably add to this. I would like to say one thing, though. This suggestion that the commission's vote, if in fact it was said, was lined up in advance of this hearing, frankly to me is very disappointing. Disappointing and irresponsible by whomever said it. And I think that it is reflective of a lack of respect for the process and for the folks who sit on this commission. And I'm not here to pat myself on the back, but it's been said before, everybody that sits on this commission does so as a volunteer. We're lucky if we get reimbursed for our out-of-pocket expenses. And I think everybody here, is evidenced by the comments that they made today, takes this job very seriously. And I think that everyone here deserves respect for what they do and the decisions that they make, even if you may not agree with the decision that they make either way. With that, Mr. Salvatore.
On the motion to grant the petition subject to the conditions agreed to by petitioner, Hoʻopili, and the city, and the amendments to the conditions as described by Commissioners Heller, Contreras, and Judge. On that motion, Commissioner Tevez?
Yes.
Commissioner Heller?
Yes.
Commissioner Matsumura?
Yes.
Commissioner Chop?
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald?
Yes.
Commissioner Contreras?
Yes.
Commissioner Makua? Commissioner Judge?
Yes.
And Chair Lazy?
Yes.
By chair, we have 8 votes to support the motion.
I'd like to again thank the parties for their hard work on this and the public again for their input. With that, this matter stands adjourned. Further scheduling will be communicated to you by staff.
We'd also like to thank all of the commission members as well, staff.